A black maid was invited to a billionaire's party to be humiliated, but she came to end his empire. 15 years ago, her father took his last breath in a factory owned by Silas Creed. They called it an accident, but Amara Lysandra knew the truth. It was greed that killed him. Now she's back, standing under the same lights that once praised his name. The air smells like money and lies. Every laugh in that ballroom reminds her how they erased her father like he never existed. Silas Creed lifts his glass, eyes glinting with cruel amusement. To him, she's still the maid. To her, he's just a man standing on borrowed time. Inside her purse is a small drive, proof of everything he stole. It feels warm in her hand, almost alive, like her father's heartbeat returning for one last night. This isn't revenge. This is a daughter returning to finish the prayer her father never got to say. Stay. You'll want to witness what happens when grief learns how to fight back. Before Amara ever stepped into Creed Tower, there was Dr. Elias Lysandra, a man who believed science could save lives until greed took his. He built a medical device meant to make surgery safer, faster. Silas Creed saw profit where Elias saw hope. One contract, one forged signature, and Elias's invention was no longer his. When he spoke up, they called him a liar. When he tried to fight back, they called him unstable. By the time the truth caught fire, his reputation was already ash. He died in a small apartment on the south side, surrounded by bills and silence. No funeral coverage, no justice. Just a daughter watching her hero disappear. At night, Amara still heard his voice. Never trade your soul for comfort. But comfort was all she had left to trade. Years passed and grief turned into survival. Amara dropped out of school, took any job that paid. Hotels, offices, kitchens, always cleaning up after the powerful. Sometimes she'd catch the reflection of her mop in the marble floor and think, my father dreamed of building tools to heal people. I'm scrubbing the same hands that broke him. Her only family was Micah, her late brother's son. He was bright, full of the same spark Elias once carried. She worked double shifts to keep him in school, telling him stories of the man who believed truth could win. But Chicago has a way of burying good people, and the higher the towers rose, the smaller her world became. Until one night, the name Creed appeared again, glowing on a screen above her mop bucket. Silas Creed's face filled every TV in the city. He spoke of hard work, innovation, opportunity. They called him self-made. Amara whispered, self-made on someone else's bones. His speeches made investors cheer and families trust. He funded hospitals using technology her father created. Every success of his felt like a theft replayed. In his tailored suit and practiced smile, he was the American dream, built from stolen breath and broken oaths. Amara didn't change the channel. She watched him closely, memorizing every word, every lie polished into truth by fame. That night, she didn't cry. She just said softly, you took his life for profit. Now I'll take your peace for truth. A week later, while cleaning a lawyer's office, Amara found a box of old archives. Inside was a newspaper dated 15 years ago. Front page, Creed Industries partners with Dr. Elias Lysandra. Two men shaking hands. Her father smiling, Silas looking straight into the camera. She stared until her vision blurred. When she looked again, the photo seemed different. Silas in focus, her father fading into shadow. That was how history worked. One man's truth erased by another man's story. She folded the page carefully, like holding a piece of him still alive. Her hands trembled, not from sadness but from something sharper, purpose. The world forgot Elias Lysandra. But his daughter never would. And for the first time in 15 years, she whispered his name not in mourning, but in promise. I'm coming for him, Papa. And when fate called, it sounded like a job offer. The job came by accident. A cleaning agency needed someone last minute at Creed Tower. Amara said yes before fear could stop her. The building was glass and gold, cold as arrogance. Every surface gleamed, every hallway hummed with quiet power. People moved fast, talking money like it was oxygen. Her ID badge felt heavy around her neck. She wasn't supposed to belong there, yet each floor whispered his name, Silas Creed. On the top level, the air smelled like polish and pride. She cleaned the same desk where her father's invention was stolen. When she wiped a frame, she paused. Behind a photo of Creed shaking hands with a senator, she noticed another edge of paper, torn, yellowed. It read, Project EL. Her hand froze. 2 letters. Her father's initials. The world seemed to narrow into that scrap of proof. Something deep inside her shifted, grief turning into direction. She tucked the paper into her pocket, heart pounding steady and slow. That night, Amara didn't sleep. She had walked into Creed Tower as a maid. She left it as a storm. Amara returned the next night, moving through the halls like a shadow. The world outside slept. Creed Tower didn't. Its machines blinked, alive with secrets. She found a locked cabinet inside the research room. One drawer half open, a name half visible. Project EL. Her throat tightened. She opened it slowly. Blueprints. Invoices. A patent transfer signed by Silas Creed. The logo on top, Lysandra Medical Systems. For a second, she couldn't breathe. It was her father's handwriting, copied and forged. Each page screamed the truth the world refused to hear. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Amara slipped the smallest file into her bag. Her fingers trembled, but her eyes didn't. She whispered to the empty room, "You can bury a man's name, but not his work." Outside, the city lights flickered like a warning. And for the first time, Silas Creed's empire began to shake, even if he didn't know it yet. She couldn't do this alone anymore. Amara needed help. She remembered the man who wrote the first story that ruined her father, Jalen Cross, a journalist who once called Dr. Lysandra a fraud. She found him in a small radio studio, older now, quieter. When she said her name, he froze. "I owe your family an apology," he said. She showed him the file. He read in silence, eyes wet, jaw tight. "I knew something was off," he whispered. "Creed paid to silence us all." Amara said nothing. She didn't come for pity. She came for truth. Jalen looked at her, the same fire he once lost flickering back. "If we bring this out, they'll come for you," he warned. Amara replied, "They already took everything. What else is there left to lose?" For a long moment he said nothing, then nodded. "Let's finish what your father started." They met in an old diner off Lake Street. Rain hit the windows like a slow drum. Amara spread the stolen papers across the table. "He buried my father," she said quietly. "I'll make him dig his own grave." Jalen didn't flinch. "You'll need proof, timing, and a stage. Creed lives for cameras. Let's use that." The plan took shape between half-empty coffee cups. Evidence, backup files, timing down to the second. Amara's voice never shook. She spoke like someone who had already lived through hell and refused to stay there. Outside, thunder rolled through the city. Inside, she wrote 3 words on a napkin. For Elias Lysandra. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was restoration. A week later, Jalen called. "Listen to this," he said. He played a recording. Silas's voice, sharp and impatient. "Label it defective. No one will check. Just ship it." Amara closed her eyes. That one sentence was heavier than years of grief. Proof. Real. Undeniable. His voice sealing his own fate. Jalen sent her the file. She downloaded it, holding her breath. The sound of Silas's arrogance filled her small kitchen. It was music. Dark, ugly, perfect. She didn't smile. She only whispered, "You buried my father with lies. Now I'll bury you with truth." For the first time, justice didn't feel like a dream. It felt close enough to touch. The next morning, Amara met Jalen again. His eyes were sharp now, his voice steady. "She loves cameras," he said, sliding a notepad toward her. "So, let's give him a show." Creed's annual charity gala would be broadcast live across the city. Politicians, investors, every major network, all watching. The perfect stage for the truth. They mapped out the plan in quiet detail. Jalen would handle the stream and prepare a backup feed. Amara would attend as one of the honored guests, carrying the files in her purse. It was risky, reckless even, but it fit. Silas built his fame on spectacle. He loved applause. He'd fall to silence. When they finished, Amara looked out the cafe window. "Do you think he'll see it coming?" Jalen smiled. "He never sees anyone beneath him." She nodded, calm and sure. The first time in 15 years, power wasn't his anymore. That night, Amara tucked Micah into bed. He was old enough to sense the tension, young enough to believe in heroes. He asked, "Will truth hurt him?" She paused, then brushed his hair from his forehead. "No," she said softly. "It'll heal us." Micah smiled. "Grandpa would be proud." Amara looked away before tears could answer for her. The clock ticked past midnight. The city outside hummed, unaware of what was coming. She sat on the edge of his bed, holding his small hand. "I just want you to live in a world where honesty doesn't cost a life," she whispered. When he fell asleep, she stayed a little longer, listening to his breathing, the sound of everything she was fighting for. The following days moved like seconds. Jalen arranged the tech, hidden cameras in floral centerpieces, mics wired into chandeliers, every angle covered, every lie waiting for exposure. Amara rehearsed her steps. Smile, greet, move, breathe. A routine built to hide the storm underneath. She stored the files on 3 USB drives, one in her purse, one mailed to Jalen, one taped under the lining of her shoe. She ironed her dress late at night, the red fabric glowing under a single lamp. Her father's handwriting still burned in her mind. Project EL wasn't just evidence anymore, it was legacy. Jalen called once more to confirm. "Tomorrow night, 7 sharp. Once it starts, don't look away." "I won't," she said. The line went silent. She looked around her small apartment. Neat, fragile, full of ghosts. Tomorrow, all of it would change. A sleek white envelope arrived the next morning. Embossed gold letters read, "For those whose lives I've changed." Amara almost laughed. She opened it slowly, fingers steady. Inside, a formal note signed by Silas Creed himself. He called her a symbol of the opportunities his empire provided. She whispered to the empty room, "You did change my life. You destroyed it." She placed the card on her kitchen table beside her father's obituary. 2 documents, one built on lies, one on loss. The irony stung, but felt right. She would walk into his world, play his game, and make him choke on his own script. For once, the invitation wasn't an insult. It was permission to end what he started. The night before the gala, Amara couldn't sleep. Rain tapped the window, steady and patient. She sat at her father's old desk, reading his last letter for the 100th time. "Justice isn't loud, Amara. It doesn't scream. It waits, then it strikes." Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with memory. She pictured him smiling, grease on his hands, pride in his eyes. She whispered back, "I'm ready now." On the table beside her, the USB drive gleamed faintly under the lamp. Outside, thunder rolled over Chicago. The storm was coming, not from the sky, but from her. When she turned off the light, she felt him there, not as a ghost, but as strength. Tomorrow, the world would finally hear his name again. Morning broke quiet over Chicago, gray and heavy with rain. Amara stood in front of the cracked mirror in her small apartment, holding the red dress she had sewn by hand. Her father once told her, "Red is for courage when the world tells you to kneel." The fabric wasn't silk or designer. It was patched, simple, real, but it carried years of grief stitched into every seam. Every thread whispered the things she never got to say. When she slipped it on, it felt like stepping into armor. The color burned against her skin, alive, defiant. She pinned her hair back, fastened her father's old watch around her wrist. The ticking was faint but steady, as if his heartbeat still lived through it. In the mirror, her reflection looked unfamiliar. Not fragile, not small. For the first time she saw a woman who had survived being invisible, a woman ready to walk through fire without flinching. She whispered, "This isn't revenge, Papa. This is your name walking again." The red glowed brighter in the dim light, fierce and unbending. Tonight, the world would remember her, not for who she served, but for what she came to finish. The Peach Tree. Grand ballroom glittered with wealth. Gold chandeliers, champagne laughter, the sound of arrogance disguised as music. Amara walked through the doors, every eye turning toward the woman they didn't expect to see. For a second, the air itself hesitated. Then came the whispers. "That's Creed's maid. Why is she here?" Silas Creed stood near the stage, tall, confident, surrounded by cameras. He lifted his glass toward her, the smile on his face sharp enough to cut. "My staff cleans up well," he said, voice carrying through the speakers. Laughter followed. Soft, cruel, obedient. Amara's eyes didn't waver. She smiled back, the smallest, quietest rebellion in the room. The red of her dress caught every flash of light, and suddenly, she wasn't invisible. She moved through this crowd slowly, like a secret taking shape. Every laugh, every glance rolled off her shoulders. Inside her purse, the drive pressed against her palm, warm as purpose. They thought she came to serve drinks and smiles, but tonight she came to serve justice. The host invited Silas to the stage, showering him with praise. He talked about innovation, generosity, legacy. Then, with mock charm, he gestured toward Amara. "Even our housekeeping inspires greatness," he joked. The laughter came too easy. Glasses clinked, voices echoed. Amara felt the sound crawl across her skin, but she didn't look away. When the noise finally dipped, she stepped forward just enough for her words to carry. "Some stains," she said quietly, "never wash off." The words cut through the ballroom like broken glass. Laughter stopped. Music died mid-note. Even Silas froze, his smirk faltering for the first time. Mara didn't need to raise her voice. The silence did this work for her. She turned away, letting the weight of her words fill the space behind her. People shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to clap or hide. No one dared look directly at her. For years, she'd cleaned their messes. Tonight, she had made one they couldn't ignore. Silas began his speech with the confidence of a king. He talked about leadership, vision, how hard work built everything he owned. The crowd nodded, clapping on cue. Then, a flicker on the massive LED screen behind him. A flash. Static. And suddenly, Silas's own voice filled the room. "Label it defective. No one will check. Just ship it." Murmurs rose like waves. People turned, searching for the source. On the screen, a video played. Documents, signatures, wire transfers, all stamped Project EL. The truth, raw and unfiltered, glowing 10 feet high. Silas spun around, disbelief twisting his face. "Turn it off!" he shouted. But the feed didn't stop. It grew louder, clearer. Amara stood near the back, her red dress bright against the panic. Her pulse slowed, not sped. 15 years of silence spoke for her. The ballroom that once praised him now watched him fall apart in real time, and for the first time Amara allowed herself to breathe. Silas grabbed the microphone, voice breaking through the chaos. "This is fake! It's fabricated!" he shouted, his face pale, desperate. "The recordings are manipulated. She's lying." Amara stepped forward, calm as still water. Her voice didn't rise, it cut clean. "You forged my father's life," she said. "This is just payback." A ripple went through the crowd. Fear, disbelief, awe. Reporters whispered. Cameras turned. Silas pointed at her. "She's nothing. A maid. A nobody." Amara's gaze didn't move. "Then how does it feel," she asked quietly, "to be destroyed by nobody?" The words landed heavier than any blow. The cameras stayed on her now, her stillness louder than his shouting. Silas tried to speak again, but the microphones died. His empire was crumbling, live on air. For 15 years, Amara had lived with silence. Tonight, that silence was her weapon, and for the first time the world was listening. Then, as truth settled in, chaos found its voice. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests whispered, phones flashed, cameras rolled. Silas Creed tried to shout above the noise, but his voice was just another sound drowning in panic. He reached for the microphone again, his hand shaking. "Turn it off! This is slander!" But no one moved to help him. His investors were already walking out, the same people who once called him a genius. The cameras that once praised him now stayed locked on his trembling face. Security hovered by the doors, unsure who they were supposed to protect. He looked around for allies and found none. The room he built on fear and charm had finally turned its back on him. Amara stood still, watching him crumble under the same lights that once made him untouchable. The irony burned. The man who built an empire on exposure was now being destroyed by it. Silas's voice cracked. "You don't know what you're doing." Amara didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence spoke louder than his empire ever did. The doors burst open, flooding the room with blue light. 2 federal agents stepped forward, badges flashing. The crowd parted without a word. "Silas Creed," one of them said clearly, "you're under arrest for fraud, falsification, and corporate manslaughter." The room went still. No applause, no cheers, just the sound of breathing, heavy, uncertain. Silas tried to protest, but his words stumbled over each other. The agents moved with quiet precision, pulling his hands behind his back. Cameras clicked. Flashes lit his face like judgment. Amara stood in the back, expression unreadable. The man who ruined her father's name now wore handcuffs that matched his cufflinks. He turned toward her one last time. There was no arrogance left, only confusion. Amara met his gaze, then looked away. Justice didn't roar that night, it whispered, and for the first time it was enough. When the agents led Silas away, the noise faded into nothing. The orchestra stopped playing. The lights dimmed until the gold glow of the room looked gray. Guests stood frozen, afraid to speak. The same people who once worshipped him now stared at the floor. Someone whispered, "Turn off the cameras." No one did. Amara walked toward the center of the ballroom. The marble floor reflected everything. The broken glasses, the ruined decor, the emptiness left behind. She looked around and thought, this room once bowed to him. Now it can't even look at him. Every empire ends in silence. That was the truth her father understood too well. When she finally turned to leave, her heels echoed through the quiet like a heartbeat. No one stopped her. They all knew the show was over. Outside, rain fell hard against the city streets. Amara stepped out of the tower, letting the storm wash over her. The red dress darkened, clinging to her skin, heavy with water and release. She didn't rush. Every step felt lighter than the one before. For the first time in years, she didn't have to hide behind silence. The streets were empty except for flashing lights in the distance. She looked up, watching the rain blur the skyline. The tower still stood tall, but its power was gone. Amara whispered, "You see that, Papa? He finally fell." Her voice was soft, almost carried away by the wind. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just breathed. Free, raw, alive. And when she reached the corner, she stopped to look back once. Not out of regret, but to remember how freedom felt when it finally rained. By dawn, her silence had already become the city's noise. Every screen in Chicago carried the same headline: Creed Capital crashes overnight. Stocks plummeted, partners withdrew, and lawyers lined up at courthouse doors. Reporters filled the airwaves with disbelief. The golden name that ruled the city was now synonymous with betrayal. Amara watched it unfold from her kitchen table, the same table where she'd once counted overdue bills. She didn't smile. There was no victory, only balance restored. Micah came in rubbing his eyes. "Is it over?" he asked. Amara nodded. "It's beginning," she said. The news kept playing. Numbers, faces, chaos, but she barely heard it. She poured 2 cups of coffee, one for herself, one beside her father's watch. Justice, she realized, didn't erase the past. It simply made room for peace. And for the first time, Chicago felt quiet. The next day, reporters waited outside Amara's apartment. Microphones reached for her face, cameras flashed, voices overlapped. Questions, praise, curiosity. "Miss Lysandra, how does it feel to take down a billionaire? Do you think justice was finally served?" She stopped at the gate, calm, composed. For a moment, she almost spoke. Then she didn't. Her eyes met the nearest camera. "Justice isn't loud," she said softly. "It's clean." The words cut through the noise like glass through water. No dramatics, no victory speech. Just truth, simple and unshakable. The reporters fell silent. Amara walked away, leaving their questions behind. Later that night, she sat by the window, watching the rain dry off the street. The city was quieter than she'd ever known it. Her reflection in the glass looked older, steadier, the face of someone who had survived the storm and refused to let it harden her. Justice didn't scream. It whispered, and the world finally listened. Weeks passed. The noise faded. But Amara didn't disappear into peace. She built something new. The Lysandra Foundation opened in a small office on South Side Chicago, a place for inventors, workers, and dreamers whose names were stolen by power. No marble floors, no corporate plaques, just purpose. Jalen worked beside her, handling the press, helping survivors tell their stories. "Your father would have loved this," he said one evening. Amara smiled. He always said truth should have an address. They organized workshops, scholarships, and legal aid. The people who once whispered her name now said it with respect. Amara didn't care for applause. She cared that no one else would lose everything just because they weren't born powerful. In a world that cheered for wealth, she chose to build dignity. That was her revolution. A year later, Micah stood on stage, holding a certificate and shaking hands. The banner behind him read, "The Doctor, Elias Lysandra Memorial Scholarship for Innovation with Integrity." Amara sat in the front row, her eyes proud, her smile quiet. Micah spoke, his voice trembling at first, then strong. "My grandfather believed that inventions should save lives, not sell them. I want to keep that promise." The audience applauded, not for fame, but for legacy. Amara wiped a tear she didn't expect. She had carried her father's burden long enough. Now it was becoming someone else's hope. After the ceremony, Micah hugged her. "We did it," he said. She whispered, "No, baby, you did it. That's the point." As they walked out together, the afternoon sun caught the red thread on her sleeve, the same color as that old dress. Courage never really fades. It just changes hands. Months later, Amara found herself standing across from the skyscraper that once carried his name, Creed Tower. Now, new letters gleamed in the morning light, Lysandra Tower. She stood on the sidewalk, coffee in hand, watching the city move around her. No crowd, no cameras, just quiet recognition. The irony didn't escape her. The same building where her father's dream was stolen now bore his name again, not through vengeance, but through truth. She thought of all the people who walked those halls now, young engineers, interns, students who didn't even know her story. And that was fine. It meant justice had done its job. Amara smiled faintly, whispering to herself, "He answers to me now, Papa." Then she turned away, leaving the tower shining behind her, not a monument to power, but to memory. Evening light filled her small office. On the wall behind her desk hung a framed quote from her father's notes. "Truth isn't owned, it's carried." Amara looked straight into the camera of a small documentary crew recording her final interview. She wasn't dressed like a warrior anymore, just a woman at peace. "Money fades," she said. "Power shifts. But dignity, Dignity outlives empires. The crew fell silent. No one asked for another take. She smiled gently. That's all I ever wanted people to remember. When they packed up, she sat by the window again, the city glowing outside. The world had moved on, as it should. But one truth stayed. Justice didn't belong to headlines. It belonged to those who refused to give up. Amara closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt the quiet not as emptiness, but as peace. And somewhere in that silence, her father's voice echoed. You did good, kid.